So I had this idea of taking my photography skills and going into film and making documentaries. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to make documentaries about postcards. Maybe find the spot where they took the picture and do a then and now picture of the postcard. Then I flipped them over on the back and I thought, oh, I could probably figure out who sent the postcard and who received it. That'd be kind of fun too. So I made a trailer and I showed it to my wife and my kids and my coworkers, and they said, that's pretty clever. I'd watch that. So here we go. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Brian Zelmer. I've been competing in the Wisconsin State Fair for the past 10 years and thought it would be kind of fun to do documentaries about postcards. Not only am I going to try to find the waterfall, school, and church on the front, I thought it would be kind of fun to do a little genealogy research and find who the people are on the back. I hope you can share some time with me on my latest adventure. Welcome to the Postcard Pilgrim. Alright, so I know what you're thinking. Dork! What is so cool about a postcard? Some postcards can be souvenirs from places you've been. Some postcards can reflect the holidays. My wife and I started hanging holiday postcards on our Christmas tree. Some postcards can be people's collections. And why a postcard? Isn't that like an ancient form of communication? Why don't you just text? For me, postcards have become more than just little scraps of paper. They've become memory triggers. I don't know about you, but as I get older, I seem to forget stuff. Like Sussex, Wisconsin. That's where my family moved after we lived in Menominee Falls. So now this postcard isn't just a souvenir of a place anymore. It's a souvenir from a point in time. A point in time that I completely forgot about. So if I can relate to you the fun times I had when I was a kid at Sussex Lions Days or the annual steam engine show, maybe you'll want to send your own postcard, just like a young man named Wesley to a Miss Emily.
Hello, Miss Lee. Why don't you come and visit us sometime? Yours truly, Wesley, Miss Emily, Dousman, Wisconsin.
How cool is that? Sounds like someone has some admiration for a teacher to me. So now you're telling me you're gonna try to find the picture on the front and the people on the back? How are you gonna do that? A great man once said, "Be joyful in hope, be patient in affliction, and be faithful in prayer." So maybe we should start there. Dear Lord, please help me find the people on the back and the pictures on the front, and let my first impression of being a dork change. Amen. All right, let's go start our pilgrimage. Come on. Our postcard tells us exactly where the picture is on the front. It says, the public school, Sussex, Wisconsin. You may have heard of Sussex, England. Sussex was named after the English settlers that came from England. So if you're watching this from outside thinking, where the heck is this place? Let me clue you in a little bit. You first need to know country of origin, state, county, and city. First, we're in the country of the United States of America. In the United States of America, you'll find 50 states. Wisconsin is one of those 50 states. In Wisconsin, then, you'll find Waukesha County. In Waukesha County, you'll find Sussex, Wisconsin. Sussex is a few towns away from Menominee Falls from our first episode. But we're not headed there next to find the school I'm looking for. We're headed there to find a book. Come on! The internet has a lot of information, but it just doesn't have what I'm looking for. I suspect that the building I found isn't the school on the postcard. So I thought we'd go old school again and make a trip to the library. The book I'm looking for is called the Lisbon Millennial Book. A millennial book is kind of like the Jubilee. It's a commemorative history of a town or a city. I'm hoping in the book there'll be what's called a plot of survey. Plot of survey is like a map of all the different people in the town. They would have farms, and on the farms they'd have little squares to show where the houses were. And then in the towns themselves, they would actually draw little pictures of churches and schools. The houses were the schools, and the churches were the houses with a cross on the top. The building that I found that I thought was the school used to have a sign out in front. They called it the honor roll. And on the honor roll, they had all the veterans from the community kind of highlighted with their names on this, like a big billboard. That big billboard is gone now because what I thought was the school sold to a doctor. And the doctor opened what at that time was called Sussex Family Practice. Like Menominee Falls, this library's not too keen about letting people film inside either. So I'll cut here. Right, we hit the jackpot I was looking for. Hopefully in here it'll tell us more about the town hall and about the school I'm looking for. So this is what I thought was the school back behind me, but I think this is actually an old town hall. I found the billboard of the honor roll for the veterans. It's at the library. I'm hoping our book that we got from the library will give us some information on what the school might be today. Hopefully it's still around. You might be thinking to yourself, why would anyone ever want to collect anything? Sometimes when you want to start collecting something, different people influence what you want to collect. My grandpa was my biggest influence. He collected everything. When I asked my grandpa about when he was a kid, he said, oh, I grew up in the horse and buggy days. My grandpa about what he first started collecting, he said, oh, when I was a kid, I used to have to plow fields for people and my parents. So when I was out plowing with the horse team, I'd watch the ground for arrowheads. Grandpa was old enough then, he started going to school. And his school was the traditional one-room schoolhouse. So when I'd ask him about his school days, he always said he really liked going to school. He was very studious. In school, my grandpa learned about Abraham Lincoln and what he did for the country. He thought that was a pretty admirable president, so he started collecting Abraham Lincoln stuff. Medals and writings and signatures and a big 6-foot statue of Abraham Lincoln, all kinds of cool stuff. Unfortunately, my grandma did not like collecting stuff, and so at times she would give Grandpa an ultimatum and just finally say, get all this stuff out of here. So my grandpa would, I guess, narrow down his collections to the things he would really like to keep, and then he would sell off the rest. Another influencer of mine was a man by the name of Fred Keller. Fred Keller used to work with me at a newspaper. I was in the production line, and he was one of the cool reporters. But Fred was also a collector. He would collect different memorabilia from like the past towns, businesses, or schools even. When Fred came to a point in his life where he didn't want to keep his collection anymore, but he didn't want to just sell it, he put a notice out to the city of Sussex and said, if you form a historical society and a place to put my collection, I'll donate my collection to the city of Sussex. So that's what they did. The town then built a civic center, and Fred donated his whole collection to the city of Sussex. If you visit the Sussex Library, the civic center is right next door. You can go check out the museum for yourself if you'd like. And maybe you'd want to send a postcard. Another person that influenced me to collect stuff was a sweet little old lady by the name of Leon Zabel. Leon's favorite thing to collect was shoes. She had a huge collection of glass shoes, bulk glass shoes, porcelain shoes, all kinds of different fragile shoes. I don't know how or why she ever started collecting shoes, but she sure did like them. The name Leon Zabel might sound familiar. You may have had her for a teacher. She was a teacher up in the Montello School District in central Wisconsin. I knew Miss Zabel personally, not because she was my teacher, but she was my grandpa's sister. Being that she was my grandpa's sister, I can remember when I was a kid, she asked me my vitals for her genealogy records. I thought that was really cool. I can remember asking, Brian, when were you born? Where were you born? What do you remember when you were young? All these other kind of fun questions. I'd answer and give the dates and stuff, and she'd write them down, and she'd type everything out. She made this really nice binder of all the family's history. When Leon retired from teaching, she kind of spent time alone in her house in Montello, but we'd go up and visit her because my grandpa had lake property on Lake Puckaway. My grandpa was little. He grew up on a farm during the horse and buggy days. Grandpa was going to school in a one-room schoolhouse. I'd ask him, how'd you get to school? You know, I'd say, well, we walked. When I asked him, well, did you walk when it was cold? He said, oh yeah, we did. We just walked faster. Over the years, my grandpa's school was bought and sold, and it was finally turned into a home resident. So now the little schoolhouse that my grandpa went to is family's home. Hey, thanks for taking a trip with me. Well, that was a lot of fun. Rediscovering the honor roll was pretty cool. Like Menominee Falls, Sussex has a walking trail called the Bug Line. You can get a lot of exercise walking that too. Proof that the building I found isn't the school I found on page 65. Here's what it says. During World War II, the town of Lisbon had an honor roll for its citizen soldiers in the conflict. It was at the front lawn of the then Town of Lisbon Town Hall, built 1866, of cream city brick, which is today Sussex family practice. Further proof that this is a town hall is found on the Plata survey. The school that I'm looking for is shown further down the street. I believe the school that I'm looking for is school number 10, shown on the Plata survey. The Plata survey is dated 1872, so that would fit the time frame of the school that we're looking for. The school was originally built in 1850 as a two-room schoolhouse. Unfortunately, that school was torn down and was replaced in 1913. So the school I'm looking for, unfortunately, no longer exists. So I guess I'll stop looking for that school. Move on to the people on the back. The back of the postcard is vague, but it does offer us a few clues. First clue is the writer, a young man named Wesley. Using one of my favorite genealogy resources, Find a Grave, if you search for a Wesley born and passed in Wisconsin around that time frame of the postcard of 1908, you get 878 Wesleys to choose from. That can be a little overwhelming and be like trying to find a needle in a stack of needles. So again, I said a few prayers and asked for help to narrow down to see if we could find the Wesley on the postcard. The postmark on the postcard reads Pewaukee, Wisconsin. So I had an epiphany. So I searched Wesleys that lived in Pewaukee around that time of 1908, and I got a hit. His name was Wesley Busse. This might be a good point to take a commercial break, just so you can get your Kleenex box, because this story gets kind of sad. Instead of starting with Wesley, I thought we'd start with Emma Lee. Emma Lee is older and her vitals would come before Wesley's. The year is 1870 and the place is Brookfield, Wisconsin. In the 1870 census, we find Miss Emma Lee living on a farm with her parents, Edward and Sarah, and her sister, Anne. The interesting side note on this line item in the census is that Anne is listed as being blind. Jumping ahead to the 1880 census, we find Emma Lee on the farm again, but she's there with her parents. Her sister Anne is not listed. Searching for Anne on Find a Grave, we find that unfortunately she died in 1872. Unfortunately, the 1890 census was all but destroyed by fire in 1926. But we did get a hit on Miss Emma Lee in April 26th of 1890. The newspaper is the Waukesha Journal. In 1890, you could submit articles of gossip to the newspaper, and the editor may or may not use them for different happenings going on in the town with its citizens. Miss Emma Lee was also born in the horse and buggy days, and she was the proprietor of a new horse cart so that she didn't have to walk to school anymore. In 1900, we find Miss Emma Lee living on her farm. Unfortunately, she's by herself and both her parents had passed away. Her mother Sarah died in 1885 and her father Edward died in 1895. Our story now picks up the writer Wesley. In 1900, Wesley was 8 years old and living on a farm with his parents and his sister Lily. In 1905, we find another census with Miss Emma Lee, and it records her occupation of being a servant and a teacher. Right around the same time, I also found a plot of survey for Brookfield. On the survey, we can find the Lee farm, and a little bit east of that is the school that I believe she taught at. Just to the south is a Busse farm. I don't believe this is the farm that Wesley lived on. I think this is Wesley's aunt, Caroline. 1908 is when our postcard was written. I believe that somewhere along the line, Wesley and Miss Emma Lee crossed paths, and Miss Emma Lee was Wesley's teacher possibly for a semester or two. Our story picks up in 1910. We find Wesley living on his family farm with his dad Herman and his sister Lily. Wesley's mother Mary was not listed. Unfortunately, Mary passed away in 1901. In 1910, we also lose track of Miss Emma Lee. She just disappears. In the 1910 census for Wesley, I found an interesting note. It said on the census that Wesley hadn't gone to school since 1909. The postcard was written in 1908. So I believe this postcard was written by Wesley in the same year he knew he was not going to go to school anymore. Knowing how much my grandpa liked going to school, I believe Wesley really liked going to school too. Might be speculation, but if I lost my mom in 1901 and I met a really fun, cool teacher, I would have admiration for her too. So I believe this postcard was written by Wesley to Miss Emma Lee in a last attempt to maybe make contact with her and renew their friendship. So why would the postcard be addressed to a Miss Emma Lee in Dousman? Emma Lee never lived in Dousman at all. I believe that maybe Wesley heard that Emma was living in Dousman, so that's why he sent the postcard there. So back to the 1910 census. Unfortunately, that was the last time Wesley would be recorded. Wesley also passed away in April of 1910 at the age of 17. Looking at other family members of Wesley's to find a descendant to maybe give the postcard to, I found that one of Wesley's aunts also died on the same day he did, April 1910. With Wesley having no descendants, I turned my focus to Emma Lee. Hopefully we'll find someone of her descendant to give the postcard to. But she disappeared. What happened to Miss Emma Lee? So what happened to our Miss Emma Lee on the back of the postcard? I decided to pay my respects to the Lee family at Prairie Home Cemetery. Right across from the Children's Memorial Garden, you'll find Section D. That's where the Lees are buried. I found Anna and Sarah and Edward, but then I made an interesting discovery. Around the Lees was a family stone by the name of Deck. Family stone markers are a little different than each individual. Family stones are like big beacons in a cemetery. It helps that family ancestors find the individuals that they're looking for. I have a similar family stone in my ancestry too. It's on my maternal grandmother's side. Her family stone is the beacon, and she is buried under her married name. So I had the same thought with Deck and Lee. Maybe Emma married into the Deck family. A little proof of that was around the corner of the Deck stone. Lee was also on the beacon stone in the cemetery. Walking around the cemetery a little further, I found a John Deck. Resting next to John is Emma L. I think we just found Miss Emma Lee. Returning home from the cemetery, I checked out John Deck on Ancestry.com. Might want to have your Kleenex box ready for this one. Returning to the 1900 census, we find John Deck, a widow, and he's living with his mother, Louisa. Louisa is also a widow. Jumping to 1908, the year of our postcard, we find Louisa has passed away in March. Our postcard was sent in February. The next record that I found for John Deck was then his marriage to Emma Lee in June of 1908. I suspect that maybe Emma Lee was the caretaker for the dying mother, and that's how she got to know John. So John and Emma married then in June of 1908. Unfortunately, in November of 1908, John died at the age of 56. In the 1910 census, we then find our Emma Lee, now Emma Deck, a widow living in Waukesha. Emma would again remarry. Our Emma Lee then lived out the rest of her life in Waukesha and passed away at the age of 70 in 1936. Unfortunately, our writer Wesley and our recipient Emma Lee on the postcard do not have any descendants. So what am I supposed to do with the postcard now? My thought is maybe hang it here in my office as a keepsake and maybe eventually donate it to the Sussex Civic Center like Fred did with all his stuff. This concludes this episode of the Postcard Pilgrim, Episode 2, The School. Take care and God bless. Of all the things you might learn from this episode, I hope your biggest takeaway is never forget to ask your grandparents or your parents about what it was like when they were a kid. I'm sure they'd love to tell you all about it. See you next time.